The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
Oh, that was a nice Napa pour this morning.
No. That's a Sonoma pour.
Oh.
Dignified and elegant.
By way of Howell Mountain, Mount Veeder.
Nice.
Wait, no.
Hey, welcome everybody.
No, but it had to go somewhere to get there.
I'm John Myers with Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey. Our guest today is Elton Slone, President and CEO of Robert Craig Winery. He's one of the rock stars in the business. And so welcome, Elton.
Thanks for my wife that all the time.
Thanks for coming over.
Does she listen?
Hey, thanks very much for having me, you guys. I mean, I have to say that in listening to your podcast, the winemakers, I have learned about so many wines. I thought I knew everything there was to know about small Sonoma producers. That's where I got my start in California with the Bunchu family that's been here forever. But you guys have had a really interesting cast of characters. So I notice a constant theme has been, I'll never drink Napa Cabernet if I'm out on the town. And so I'm like, F you guys, I need to come in and bang the drum for my side of the hill, because Napa does make interesting wines, and I hope I'll sway some opinion.
See, Sam, I told you he'd take the bait.
Right?
I told you.
If it's less than $400, we do.
No, at this point, based on if you just tracked the wines, Cabernet is a minority grape in California. Less than 7% of California's Cabernet. Nobody ever talks about it, and it gets no love because the only thing that matters is Grenache. That's right. According to the Winemakers podcast. So we figured, it's January. It's Cabernet Awareness Month. And
what?
I don't know. Oh, I'm making it up. Cabernet needs love, man. It's fallen behind.
Yeah. And I've been waiting to ask this question all day, but I think John, you had some. Everyone's been calling you this week, asking you if you're still alive. My dad did the same thing from North Carolina, asking if we were still alive. I don't know if they watch Good Morning America and what's going on in other parts of the country, but they think that we are all basically hanging on to a tree branch out here, and not to make light of it, some people are. But we're actually enjoying the rain, enjoying what it's bringing to the vines and to California and to our water table and to our snow and all of those things. So and then I did see a guy out in the vineyard today. First time I saw a guy out in the vineyard. It looks like he was positioning shoots or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Ready to prune or pruning would be
maybe a little pre-pruning.
Yeah.
So it was the first time I'd actually seen someone out in the vineyard.
Pretty much
was this morning. Yeah. So it's kind of cool.
We are,
and we're outside today.
Yeah, we're outside. There's actually almost blue sky. This warm yellow orb
Patches
blinding us in what unusual thing. We're definitely very much walking the line between the right amount of rain and too much rain. And there's parts of the state that are hitting the too much. But it's one of those things. Yes. People have lost their lives and homes and cars and whatever, and it's tragic and terrible. That's more about climate change and our infrastructure than the fact that we're getting the rain that we need so desperately.
Elton, how's it affecting your vines and the snow and the rain?
Well, we're in the mountains. Most of our planted acres are on the top of Howell Mountain. So we own the 22 acre estate vineyard up there that Bob purchased with his partners back in '93, and then we bought Candlestick from Duckhorn in 2015, that's an additional 26 acres under vine on 100 acres, and so we're right on the summit ridge on both of those properties, and so oh my God, no matter what we do, that water runs off. You go through the vineyard, and I'd like to just at least have a little bit of mud on the floorboard of the car, when I get in there without knocking my shoes off, but it runs away pretty quick up there. So I always think for us, the water is a very good thing, in particular after the fires. I mean, the fires of 2020, we got a tiny amount of fruit in, maybe 10% of the entire crop, because I was running the leaf water potentials way too high against the advice of, Phil's buddy, Pete Richmond. They're like, Elton, you got to, the stress level's way too high. It's going to get hot. And I'm like, let's just go where we are, and as it turned out, I came out there and said, holy shit, the fruit is starting to desiccate. I got to bring this in. So we got a little bit of fruit in 2020, but all the stress from the drought and the fires and everything that went on that year in 2021, I mean, we've averaged up there about 1.9 tons an acre over the last 10 years. And in 2021, we averaged 0.6 tons an acre, So
and then how much did you do any better in 2022?
And 2022, a little bit better, but between all of the stress and the lack of water, and there was no way for a lot of the vines to recover from the fire. And then whatever your pop's doing to me over there in the Mount Veeder vineyard, he keeps saying the fruit will come. And I'm like, you realize that we have to have grape bunches to make wine,
Technicalities, Elton.
So,
technicalities.
But
look at the view.
Yeah. So Sam's
Look at the invoice.
Sam's father, Phil Couturier, is one of the great, I think maybe the greatest farmer in all of the Mayacamas range, and he's just a pleasure to work with. So it's great to sit down with the progeny here today, and if any of that comes through the genes half as much, you'll know. But for us, the moisture has been wonderful. It's been the high winds that have come with it. We get a good soaking in the wintertime, and what's different with climate change is you have the fires, and now I was up there on Tuesday, and it's just 58 mile per hour winds constantly, 70 mile per hour gusts. And so, we have copper shingles on the roof up there to keep the roof lighter, so we didn't have to have as many poles in the barrel room. And that means it's like a meth head Easter egg hunt in our neighbor's vineyard every time the wind blows, because
I love those.
doing a section of roof about the size of this table is $10,000. If you have to redo one of those copper shingles, I'm like, we're getting out there and we're finding that copper nipple.
Sam, how's it looking for Enterprise in the fields?
I mean, like we were saying, this is maybe the first or second day of 2023 that there's been actual field work going on. Interestingly, as much rain as many parts of the state have gotten, Sonoma Valley in particular is kind of on the low end of the scale of that. So we haven't had, knock on wood, we still have another atmospheric river or two rolling through, but we haven't had much damage. There's trees down, there's a little bits of erosion hotspots here and there. But this is also, and as Elton knows, as somebody who pays the invoices, Enterprise Vineyards sets up erosion control. And this is the standard that you have to follow now, but I've always set up erosion control as if every winter is going to be like this, because you don't know when the 12-inch atmospheric river is going to hit, and you have to be ready to or
I won't even say.
Right.
Yes, when it will take you from behind.
Yeah, exactly. They're out there in the ocean spinning towards you. So from that standpoint, everything's holding up pretty good, and I think
it only rains in Shelbyville, right?
Yeah,
here, that's where it rains. It just all comes down in that one spot to close the road.
They had photos online this morning of Shelbyville, and it's underwater.
Wait, did Keeblestad have to close their? Because remember we saw that they were going to be closed for like January, and
I think that was wise.
Actually thinking about this.
Well, I thought they fixed that when they.
But you couldn't get there anyway.
But didn't they fix that when they fixed the fire station?
No,
I think the fire station is the high ground. I don't know.
All right.
It's there's a lot of water out there.
the fire station actually moved to another fire station.
Right, they're all out because there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
It's an island. It's Keeblestad Island.
Oh, I thought you meant it floated away to another area.
Floated upstream. But to your point, Elton, of like the last 3 years being so stressful for the vines, part of that is they never really shut down. Right. There was never like real dormancy, and I think
I was going to say that too. We've had a nice cold winter.
Yeah, that cold leading up to this, month of rain that we've had, hopefully, and again, this is another, knock on wood, gives them a real chance to have true dormancy this winter and come back,
Store some carbohydrates
and be really raring to go, come bud break 23. So that's, it's a pretty optimistic outlook despite, what CNBC is putting out there, and California's
underwater. Have you
underwater.
seen Topless Creek? They're completely flooded down
there's when it all comes, you find the weaknesses in the infrastructure. I think that's been highlighted a lot this week. Is and floodplains be floodplains.
Right, exactly. And creeks are going to be creeks, and
it's called Topless Creek.
Yeah, exactly. It's not Topless Mountain. No. It's Topless Creek.
Yeah, I think about as I drove down from Howell Mountain on Tuesday, there's so much standing water in the vineyards down in Oak Knoll and in Rutherford in that area. And really, as a mountain farmer, I mean, I get everything. You get wind, you get bears can come in. If you get a bear into the property, that's 50 grand worth of fruit in a couple hours. And so I was just, to me in particular, because your family has always farmed organically at Enterprise Vineyards and really kicked off our, foray into organic on all the properties that we do. Anytime you get that much water on the vines, it's inviting pest pressure and disease into the vines. And so to me, now every time, when it rains in September, people are like, oh, this is nice. I'm like, shit, that's another 45 grand, because you got to do another, you can't just get that, you can't just spray the cancer causing agent that works really well out over everything, but it does need, mildew is a constant battle. And so I'm really happy to be in the mountains when I see all that standing water, because for us, it's about long-term trunk health for our vines. Because, I think Lafitte, they used to be 80 years and now they're taking the vines out at 70 years to do the replanting for the Grand Vin. And most of California's, it's like if you get to 25 years, it's a lucky story. And there's another big replanting going on now after everybody finished up, getting the AXR1 out for phylloxera. Now everybody knows, okay, this is how my rows should be oriented. In order to keep the heat off the vines, we're going back to California sprawl, or having a really high, wire the vertical shoot position with all the fruit in an exposed zone is all gone. Right. It's a fascinating change, but this weather for us, if it weren't for the wind, which is just structural damage, but in terms of the vines itself, everybody's like, are the fires good for the vines? I'm like, no, the fires are not good for the vines. The ash is not doing anything for the soil, and this cold, wet weather is critical.
Yeah, totally.
God, he doesn't talk like he was a sales rep in Indiana, does he?
I know. Because
it's like, wow, where did this guy come from?
Because can we go back a little bit? Because I've been waiting to ask this all day. How is it that we have John Cougar Mellencamp to thank for having you here today?
Now, first of all, I would never ever say Cougar around
John,
him,
call me Cougar and I'll kill you, Mellencamp.
That would be the end. But I got into wine when I was waiting tables. I graduated in 1989 from Indiana University, which is a great school in the southern part of Indiana, where it's very beautiful. We always say Purdue, where the men are men and the women are too. And Indiana was more of the liberal arts school, and Purdue was always,
Bloomington is a great town. Nick's English Hut for Stromboli's, man.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right? So, hey, you can't go wrong at Nick's. It's funny, the guy that was a grill jockey way back in the day now owns the place, so I can still get in the back door on homecoming weekend without waiting in that 2-block line. But when I was waiting tables, I was doing bartending and waiting tables in a little restaurant called Dinneman's back in the day. And it was right next to John's house. And all of these great musicians would come in to play the Indiana University, the IU Auditorium, which had tremendous acoustics. So the guys from REM, like Peter Buck and Michael Stipe and Peter Frampton and Willie Nelson, and all of these guys would come in because they wanted to go. John had a state-of-the-art recording studio at his house, and they wanted to go in there and record with Kenny Arnoff, his drummer, who could keep perfect time in a live recording. So he came in and just pulled me aside and said, Elton, you gotta up the wine game in here, or we're gonna have to drive to town. And so that was, and so I worked with, he had a great distributor rep. I worked with him and I started getting all of these wines, whether it was, at that time we could buy Domaine de Romanée-Conti, not, Romanée Saint Vivant or the Echezeaux, but I mean like Richebourg and La Tâche. You could get those wines for, $130, $140 to the account. And so I started just loading up with all these great Burgundies and Patrick La Doucette, Baron de El, Puy-Fumé, and just these tremendous wines from around the world. And John hardly ever drank anything, but he'd always give me the $200 handshake, and I was so poor at that time. If I would literally load a body in a car for him for $200. So we have professors in there be like,
not that you did, but you would have.
Exactly,
you would have.
The professor would say, "Is somebody smoking?" And I'd be like, "Don't worry, $5." I'd be like, just pull the partition over, and you'd be like, "You can't smoke in here." I'm like, "Mr. Mellencamp, you can smoke." But I started tasting these wines, and in this little account, our distributor rep, which is why I firmly believe in the staff training to this day, turned us all into wine heads. And when I graduated from school, I was hired on to National Wine and Spirits, which is now Republic National, but at the time it was just family owned by the Lacrosse family. And they said, "We want to send you around the world to be our wine guy." And so it was just this tremendous education as a very young man. I think I was 21 or 22 years old at the time, and got to go around the world. So I've always had an old world sense, but then worked for Robert Mondavi in the Midwest and moved to California in the mid 90s to manage the Bun Shoes business, and then on to Craig in 2004. And so I came to California.
We're like so far behind on the ding. So of all the names that have been dropped in the last
and you know what? And I'm going to slow Elton down just a moment because I do have some listener questions. I'm supposed to ask you about something that happened at Chateau Muscar. Musar
in Lebanon,
and making and its role at making you a legend at Robert Mondavi.
Oh my God, I have no idea who's listening to this. I did.
Neither do we. It's fine.
There was
Bart's mom.
There was an MW candidate at Robert Mondavi Winery when I was there. That at our national sales meeting, he put together some wines for the group to taste, and I think there were about 120 of us in the room up in Whistler, Canada. And he says, if anybody names this wine, I'll give him my paycheck. And, I'll give him this month's paycheck. Well, I never got the paycheck, but I literally just had Chateau Musar in my tasting group. So I said, "Oh, this is Gaston Hochar's wine, Chateau Musar." And he's, his mouth hit the floor, but everybody's like, "What is going on? Did you see the bottle?" But, I literally just had the wine, and the wine is very distinctive.
Yeah.
And so, I got some serious street cred that I didn't deserve probably for that, because
and
I
you
had the wine like a week before.
Right. And the reason why I threw it in there is because there was something said about you were young when this happened. You were still pretty young to your drinking, but it sounds like not if you were working for Mondavi at the time.
Yeah, well, I had a great tasting group where and National was incredibly supportive. A friend of mine was studying for the MW, and so we did a lot of really focused tastings. And I think to this day, my palate, I can tell you, what block went into what when I'm tasting up on Howell Mountain blind, but I'm not as good anymore at picking out. I'm like, this is obviously Italian. They're like, that's Beaujolais. And when the brown bag is the great equalizer, Yep. So I think I still have a pretty good palate, but it's like anything else. You know how it feels. I went out and rode my bike for 3.5 hours in the dirt on Sunday and just got crushed. And it, and it's not like I've been riding every week. Same with your palate.
Right.
You just, you don't get it trained. But I've always loved the great wines of the world. So to me, it's almost ironic that I'm an owner of a Napa Valley Trophy Cabernet house,
And maybe, we should go back to that a little bit, because there's there's Chardonnay in our glass, which, how is it that you came to find
fucking great too.
Chardonnay from Sonoma County, or Gap's Crown, but also a little history on Robert Craig, because I know what I read, but I don't think a lot of people know the history of Robert Craig. So maybe you could touch a little bit about the wine and then the beginnings of Robert Craig.
Well, I'll do it short. I just think that, Bob Craig is one of the greatest guys in the wine business. I mean, there are not too many people in the Napa Valley, which has become increasingly corporate over the last 10 years. I think about, one after the other, whether it's the French insurance companies buying the Arajos out at, and now have Islay, and the wine is still very good. Our next door neighbors at Outpost and Lamborn up on our little driveway up at the top of Howell Mountain on Summit Lake Drive, you name it. But Bob Craig was one of the original Mountain Cabernet farmers in the Napa Valley, and really was absolutely the ringleader in founding the Spring Mountain and the Mount Veeder AVAs. Okay. So Bob Craig was doing a vineyard deal with William Hill, and like everybody else that William Hill ever did business with, it all ended up in a lawsuit. But I'll name names. But Donald Hess loved the vineyard that they planted on Mount Veeder, and this is in the late 70s, and he ended up convincing Bob to come aboard and plant his 300 some acres up there. And then Bob worked for Donald Hess for 10 years between 80 and 90. And when Donald decided he wanted to go from 20,000 cases of wine to 350,000, that's when Bob said, hey, I just want to do small lot Cabernet. His buddy Dennis Johns had been working for St. Clement Winery, and they had a great Howell Mountain vineyard that somehow they signed over to him because they needed somebody in the U.S. for the bank loan. And that's how Dennis Johns ended up getting White Cottage Ranch, which is now Adamus. And now he has a little property down called Second Chance, or Second Time Around, or some such name. But Bob turned Dennis turned Bob Craig onto the property. So we bought our Howell Mountain and our Affinity property down in Coombsville in the early 90s. And that's when, Howell Mountain, everybody told Bob he was crazy to pay like $28,000 for an acre for it. And now it's all going for $1 million an acre, right, up there. So Bob Craig
was a vineyard guy.
Yeah, he was really a real estate guy. Okay. Everybody says Bob was a great farmer, or people still ask me, is Bob still making the wine? I'm like, well, Bob has been dead a number of years now, and he retired from the winery in 2012. So the answer is no. Right. He never made the wine. But Bob Craig had a tremendous eye for property and for development. And so when he saw, it was Alex Ryan who raised his family up, the CEO of Duckhorn, who raised his family up at the little house that's on our winery. That's like our crush intern flop house and place we get lunch now. So, I'm just amazed the rain hasn't found its way in that door. But Alex also planted and developed the Candlestick Vineyard that we bought for Duckhorn. But I think along with, Bob Travers and Mayacamas, probably Randy Dunn on Howell Mountain, and the Bronsteins on Diamond Creek. I mean, Bob Craig is OG squad of Mountain Cabernet farmers, and nobody really, realizes that as much as probably they should. I tell people that all the time, but you're
not charging enough for the wine. That's what that means.
Right. Hey, I thought you told me you didn't want to drink any more $400 wines. We can make it happen.
You got to charge at least $800 a bottle, and then your reputation really gets solidified.
Yeah. After hearing Artie Johnson on here last time, he said, I've had way too much $400 wine out of plastic cups. I'm like, so when do we start hanging out?
Yes.
I was like, Artie, I'm calling you up, man.
Anytime you see Artie, have a cup in hand and a lighter. Right. There's going to be a cigar. There's going to be wine that you want to taste.
Let's just talk. I mean, we got some wine on the table, so I don't know if we just want to kind of talk about this.
The Chardonnay is delicious.
Yeah. Great.
This candied pear thing happening. It's just like
great acid. Yeah. I mean, it's like you took grapes, squeezed it into a bottle, and we're drinking it. Yeah.
Yeah. The wine,
just that simple.
The wine has this kind of citrus pear quality to it early on in its life, and it really starts to get that that oyster shell, God, if I hear oyster shell, salinity, and precision, those words one more time in my white wine describing life is going to leap onto a sword. But it really does have those qualities. And you can see the only reason I make this wine, I don't know where the back label is, but you can see what's on the back label. It says a portion of it, your purchase of this racy, vibrant wine will benefit the Tamales Bay Oyster Overpopulation Concerned Citizens Alliance, because that's the only reason we produce it, is because I love Tamales Bay oysters, and most California Chardonnays are like 3.7, 3.8 pH even. I mean, I'm always amazed. And this, Ravenot Chablis is consistently 3.35, 3.30. This thing is like 3.2, 3.18, so it has a raging, the TA and the pH is low and the TA is always high in this wine. And, at first I thought, I just want to do this completely without oak. And so we did a little bit of this Chardonnay and did blind tasted all the lots, and I fermented some in concrete. And then I was like, God, what is this lot? This tastes like shit. And everybody's like, that's your lot. That's the one you wanted to make. So, obviously we have more talented winemaking at Robert Craig than myself.
So it is a team.
Yeah. But I have had to make the wine in 2008, but Jason Price has been there many years. And we work with Keith Emerson, who's the director of winemaking over at Vineyard 29, who also knows your pop. Just a great guy. I worked with Keith as far back as Gunlock Bunshoe days. He's an incredible talent. So Keith has been a nonstop with us since 2005 when I hired him to consult, not like come in once a year, but heavy consult. And we make a totally different style of wine than Vineyard 29. Ours is, the Chardonnay is a perfect example. It's a great starting place because it's what we do. It's these wines that are structured and racy. This sees quite a bit of new oak at the start, and then nothing, the surly stirring is cut out, heavy pressure at the press to inoculate the wine against oxygen contamination later. And it's cool to me as I, listen to Artie and your other guests talking about how they're making it. I mean, there's this, you guys are I've never thought of myself as an old guy until I see all the young guys, coming on. I'm like, God, I'm old as shit. And
I'm right there with you.
But in the Napa Valley, I'm basically a whippersnapper. I'm the only one in the restaurant that doesn't have the oxygen tank next to me coming in. But what I love is to see the wines of a Cerritos and Ted Lemon's wine at Literai, which I absolutely love, and Mayacamas, and these wineries that are producing these wines in a style. And Montelena has quietly done it forever. And they make quite a bit of Chardonnay, but it's always good. So this, to me, is a great intro to kind of what our wines are about, which are, to me, ageability and sense of place.
Perfect.
And where are we going to go from here? I'm going to let you direct the lineup, because
shockingly, I'm really excited about these non-Bordeaux Robert Craigs. I had no idea.
It's just a Cabernet racist society. I've noticed on your podcast that, shit.
Cabernet, we just don't have that cool of friends.
Rhone supremacists.
Yeah, that's right. Rhone supremacists. Cabernet is always the one at this table that takes a beating. I've heard more than 5 different people on 5 different shows say, it's like, do you go home and drink Napa Cabernet? Come on, mofos, we're gonna have Napa Cabernet today, and I'm putting a line in the sand. But first, because I love so many wines, we happen to right next door. I never mess around with Zinfandel. When I started at Robert Craig, we were buying a Zinfandel from an Amador County producer. So we made an Amador Zin. I'm like, boy, now you truck those grapes that are super ripe for 8 hours across the Central Valley and up the Howell Mountain, and guess what happens? You make some pretty lousy wine from it. And so in any event, we made some good wine in those years. Every once in a while, a wine clubber will show up with a 2003 bottle of Amador Zinfandel, and I'll be like, damn, it's still hanging in, but this is real deal. So this is Black Sears from our next door neighbors, also farmed by Pete Richmond and Silverado Farming, and we have the guys that manage our place, Nick Antoniano and Miguel, there that are also part owners in Silverado, are just amazing.
So the production facility is up on the top of the mountain.
Exactly, right on the summit.
The on-site winemaker's name is what again?
Jason Price.
Jason Price. And how big a crew do you guys have up there? And does the crew work in the vineyard and also in the cellar, or is it just you and Jason?
No, it is Jason and Yordanos Gibru, who is an Ethiopian woman that has come to us by way of, she was making wine in Georgia after she was doing some spirits in Ethiopia, and incredibly talented. So she's the assistant winemaker. Jason's full-time winemaker. And now anymore, I mean, I made wine there 1 year in 2008 after firing the winemaker for totaling the company truck and leaving it in the oncoming lane. You know, when you get the call from Jerry Sears saying, Elton, your truck is in the your truck is in the lane. I'm like, oh God, you know. And so he's famously, the winemaker that time said, well, it's not like I'm being fired. And I said, oh, it's exactly like that. And so I discovered that no winemaker worth their salt will leave their place of business in August 25th of that production year. So exactly. Everybody said, so I'll start January 1st. I'm like, but what about now?
Right.
So yeah, so that was
I'm busy, man.
So Howell Mountain is its own AVA, right?
It is the first nested AVA in the Napa Valley out of 14. So Howell Mountain was established in 83, and then it's the only one with an elevation requirement. So Howell Mountain starts at 1,400 feet because it's above the inversion layer. So anybody here that's been hiking or skiing at altitude, you know that the light is different. The molecules react differently in the grapes. You have way less water holding capacity in the soil. We didn't have the ability, we didn't have all the dynamite that Abreu has. So the soils were ripped unevenly, you know, as when your father walks around any vineyard, it's like, oh, it wasn't ripped right. That's what he had. The first thing that I know that
your impressions between, John Mellencamp and Phil Couturier are just so spot on.
Yeah. So
1,400 feet, that's high.
Yeah.
For the coastal ranges. What's the peak of Howell Mountain AVA?
The peak is like 2,550, I want to say, and we're right on that summit ridge. Our place is just over 2,300 feet. You know, the top of the vineyard is like, 2,380 or something like that.
It sounds like there was like 3 people above 1,400, and they all got together and said, "Let's create our own AVA."
But look,
everyone down below us will be.
You know what? Good for them.
It's the fog line.
It's when things change.
It's where the inversion layer starts. So they all got the maps out.
So who else is up there?
So
is it Outpost?
Oh yeah, Outpost. Right? I mean, there's so many. We literally have, I want to say 100 plus wineries. 100 and I should know this. I'm on the Howell Mountain board, so it's ridiculous. But there are like 140 or 150 wineries in the Howell Mountain AVA, and then you have people like Jason at 100 Acre that they can't be in the AVA. You have Rick Foreman that does have a vineyard ownership that has traditionally been made by Abreu, but he has one vineyard up there that he's going to start making wine from. But he's down below. Burgess, Villadere are just down below. So there's a lot of famous properties that would love to put Howell Mountain on the label that they can't do it because
that's a good club when you be like 100 Acre. No, you can't be in our club.
Yeah.
No, you're not that cool.
That's riper and richer than my style, to say the least. But everybody has their gig, and this wine comes about because I have always loved. I think Artie spoke about Monterosso, which I consider one of the great Zinfandel vineyard sites in the world, and this is one of them too. I mean, there's Jackass, there's this place, there's Ridge, Ridge, probably Geyserville, I think of, and oh my God, this vineyard, this is farmed by Pete Richmond as well, which is nice. So it's organic as well as our vineyard, and we're neighbors, and so it's very easy. We're getting, at the price we're paying, it's like your pop. He's not afraid to send you an invoice. But these are all head train vines that were planted in the early 70s. And it's just a beautiful place. I mean, it's not as
beautiful wine.
It's not as windy and solid rock as our place next door, but God, these Zinfandel grapes, it has this sort of ground white pepper, exotic Howell Mountain spice that's all over this wine.
How long did it take you to convert to organic farming?
Well, with Phil, it was instantaneous because he said, I only farm organically. So I'm like, well,
So you're
then
converted.
Right.
I'll tell the neighbors the kids can take off the hazmat suits when they wait for the school bus next to the vineyard. We really started going that direction in 2012. We used to be just Carlos Mendez, our employee number one, who's still one of the most knowledgeable, one of the greatest farmers, best guys. But that generation is all going away. A lot of the children of some of the most talented Mexican workforce that has built the Napa Valley and really never got the credit that it deserved. They're off, working in tech and doing other things. And so, for so many years, our farming was a guy in a truck with a dog, But you use somebody like Enterprise or like Pete Richmond, the Silverado farming, because the level of attention to detail is tremendous, and there's a great deal of interaction with us on it. But I'm not responsible for making sure the workers get breaks, every 20 or 30 minutes, right, whatever. So going to organic to me has been a process where you have to be able to survive financially to have a business. But as I've lived my life, and we've been through these fires, we've been through these bomb cyclones, the world is groaning. And so now we're going with lighter bottles than these. We're going with no capsules anymore because all we do is throw away the tin, all the time. And we're still using, natural cork. DM is still natural cork. So you're still preserving the cork forest, the way of life, the fact that they're taking, 30% more, greenhouse gas out of the air than a standard forest. All of these things, to me, you have to be conscious of. So for us, we'll be certified on Veeder, I believe, this year. It's our third year with your pop farming that, with Enterprise farming that. And with Howell Mountain, I think next year we'll be certified. So we're organically farmed everywhere. And where we buy fruit is organically farmed as well. So we're 90% estate, 10% purchased fruit. What do you think of the Zin?
I think it's so Howell Mountain in that in the structure. There's not it's not a fruit bomb at all.
No, not at all. It's structure.
So structured.
Really beautiful fruit.
Yeah. Almost austere.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a Russian River Zin next to this, that is like Brunello de Montalcino, and this is Barolo. I mean, this is the Nebbiolo of Zins. And you can leave this in the glass for hours, overnight, and there's no oxidation the following day. It's so knit.
The color on it is beautiful. It's got this dark color, but it has a little bit of a blue hue to it that makes it just beautiful.
And I know we're here obviously for Robert Craig Winery, but since we have the opportunity, can you just shout out a little bit Black Sears, because it's basically an all Zinfandel Napa winery, right?
Well, I wish it was all Zinfandel, because they just tore out a huge amount of the Zinfandel vineyard. Because they get $80 for the Zin and they get $180 for the cab. Yeah. And Chris Chambois and Ashley Sears, his wife, our neighbors, are just the most awesome people. I mean, I just absolutely love them. And Jerry Sears, Ashley's father, he passed away at the same time as Bob Craig in 2019, like the same week. And he was a guy who was a poet, a builder, a farmer. He was a Renaissance man, and just one of the great people you would ever meet in your lifetime. And I think about this generation of Napa from, Don Chapelet and those guys, and oh my goodness, Mary, I can't believe I'm blanking her name, from Spotswood, and then
Novak.
Mary Novak.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary
because
Novak.
Beth
right?
is
Beth Novak, and
Yeah. And then one of
Sonoma
my
podcast.
one of my favorites, Margaret Duckhorn, passed away just a few weeks ago. And
Right.
and when I was coming out here as a kid from Indiana, just being a distributor, she opened the doors to her home and treated me like I was the biggest account in the United States, and had me in for lunch. And these are the people that I learned from and learned how to be ambassadors for the Napa Valley. And despite all the corporate going on, it's still predominantly people that make less than 5,000 cases of wine, and still predominantly family owned, which is great. But for me, whatever we can do as a company, to get lighter glass. I'm not ready to go can yet. I've always liked from the time I grew up in this business, in the late 80s and early 90s when I was in distribution, I've always liked the feel of significant glass at the table. But since it's killing the planet, I don't know what whoever it was that said it about Amazon, honey, you can't order Amazon. It's killing the planet. She's like, yes, but it's doing so conveniently, darling.
I mean, you're right. It's interesting. After our show last week, when you hear how hard it is to change your carbon output, it kind of makes you almost go, yeah, well, we'll just do the best we can, and hopefully the technology catches up, right? I mean, she painted a pretty tough picture the other day.
Well,
So-
I mean, I think it's, I don't think we'll avoid being a climate podcast because everybody's going to talk about it. Everybody's looking for every incremental little piece that they can do to do better. So if that means losing the foils and sacrificing, this expectation of substantial bottle. What did you say? Substantial glass?
Yes.
That was a good, but
A substantial package.
So make it 10% less.
So take it
10% less substantial.
yeah. And that's just
if everyone's
it's interesting to look at these two bottles next to them. I mean,
Right.
which one would you grab first?
The 09 Coat Roti.
every time.
Was I not supposed to look at the label?
God. Hey, I'm sitting right here.
Elton, which bottle would you grab first? The 09
Come on.
Coat.
There's no guarantee that this Rostand La Landon 2009 is going to be 2009 is going to be great because it's traditionally cork finished, but it smells great.
Wait a minute.
Wow.
And that's why I brought these over to the table.
in this shade.
Because he was a little on fire before the show even started about
Yeah,
these
and let's
corks.
talk about that a little bit before we get into those wines.
You'll notice we have some different corks on the table. You got some synth, right, and some natural.
Yeah,
Well, they're all natural, right?
they're all natural. They're all natural.
What do they call these?
DM.
So DM has been exploded, introduced to an unstable molecule that adheres to any impurities or bacteria in the cork, and then readhered with food-grade adhesive, or in our case, with beeswax.
Well, at Opus, they test every cork, so you don't have to worry about it.
Well, the thing I would say, I say nay to that. I have started keeping a rogues gallery of corked wines that I've had. And I've had so much, and the nefarious thing about the Portacork Icon corks that we were using, and David Ramey so pointed this out right in front of the guys from Cork Supply and from Portacork that were doing their bit at Intelligence Napa Valley to speak about trap and capture, how they were going to make these Icon corks, but they're below the threshold of detectability for TCA, trichloride, anisole, or as we call it at Craig, anusol, because it gives you that terrible itch, but but you get these
with these corks.
you get all these wines, and it happens rarely because they're very high quality corks. But you get these wines all of a sudden on Instagram, somebody will DM me and say, "Hey, does your Howell Mountain just need more time? The 16, it's like really tight." And I'm like, "No. If you don't open that wine and say, 'Oh my God, I need another case of this,' it's not." And then I'll send a bottle back and say, "Try this one out," and they go, "Wow, this is like completely different wine," and it's because it's that low level TCA. It's so nefarious because if you're a sommelier, people think, oh, this is just how your wine is. This wine isn't corked. So one of my friends that worked for Accendo, she was using those. They were using the same porta-cork icons, and she brought over a 2016 bottle of that wine, which is almost $400 a bottle. Sure, Artie drinks it out of a paper cup, and same thing.
One of
She
those,
opens
little,
it
one of
up.
those little like ones you have in the field that come to a point, look like little snow cone holders, and you just have, and then once you have one sip,
Throw it on the ground.
You just throw it away.
compost it. You
Compost it. But at any rate, I said, this wine's corked. And she said, absolutely not. This wine's just fine. It needs to open up. That is the.
So
that
it
is
needs
the,
to blow off.
That is the, yes. It's going to blow off, or it just needs to open up, is the final. That's it. And sure enough, I said, well, if you have another bottle, I'll pay for it right now. If it's not different than this one. She went out and just absolutely could not believe that it was the same wine. She was like, this is wild. And I'm like, welcome to my world. I went through the whole vintage, 2 vintages, 2015 and 16, Howell Mountain, where I should have done Diem and did not. So
well, and that was what you were doing. You were opening up the 15s that we're going to taste here shortly, and you were going through the corks, trying
Sam
to
was confused. There's cab.
trying to see if there was any effect. But I mean, from our discussion with Dave Ramey, it's not even the corkiness. The TCA is not even really the problem. It's the seal. Right? It's the oxygen exchange that they can't guarantee in traditional cork.
That's right. And he came out and showed us, here's my dissolved, here's my free SO2 before bottling and after bottling with Diem, which was exactly the same for years and years and years after bottling. And then the ones with traditional cork were all over the place. And then the extractables, he took this huge one of those big water jugs that you use like in an office water cooler and filled it up with Almaden Mountain Rhine or some innocuous white wine, and then put a bunch of Diems in one and put a bunch of traditional corks in the other one. And the other one was like a dark color, so all of these extractables as well. And so for me, if people are not searching, especially on the high end, for an additional cork closure, I mean, one of my good friends represents some great Burgundy imports, and this is the first year they started using Diem because it was so great to open one of those up at Barber's Q in Napa, the Q restaurant, and have the wine be I was like, oh, Diem, great, because I'd had wildly different experiences with the same Polini Montrachet at Don Giovanni. From different corks. So it shouldn't be that way.
Okay. I mean,
I'm prattling on too long.
No.
So
this is awesome. This is what it's about.
Elton, I was going to ask you about the soils up there. What are they composed of?
The soils are composed of rock. So we have like a basalt series. Some call it like an Aiken loam up there. It's this very red soil on Howell Mountain that's extremely high iron content because Howell Mountain was produced from the eruption of the Sierras, the Vaca Range. So the soils are relatively young, 5 million years old. But I think the Blue Ridge Mountains are like 22 million years old. So relatively young soils, but extremely volcanic, well-drained soil. Over on our Candlestick property, it's almost exclusively a white volcanic tufa. So very different experiences in the wine.
This is the Mount Veeder property?
No, Howell Mountain. So Veeder, all of that, our vineyard is not volcanic. There's some volcanic near the top of Veeder, but most of Veeder has been pushed up from the ocean floor by earthquake. And so you have this compressed marine material. It's almost like with a little sandstone and shale. So they're just very, very different soil types, and they all produce wildly different wines. To me, we're going to get into our Côte de Craig because I named it Côte de Craig because I love Côte Rôtie. However, we're replanting this particular section of our vineyard. It's these old bushy vines, but the fire took some of this out. And so it's supposed to be about 75 Grenache or 75 Syrah, 25 Grenache, but this is about 65 Grenache and then 35 Syrah. So in the years to come, it'll be heavier Syrah. But this is a hell of a wine. This is
What was the vintage on this again?
2019. It's brand new release. So unfortunately, I didn't have any library of this. Our first vintage was 2015 when we bought Candlestick. And I said, hey, we got to just tear this. We got to tear these vines out, this Grenache and Syrah. And Keith Emerson said, whoa, wait.
We'd gotten to Keith by then.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He said, wait a minute, Elton, that looks good. And then we got it in.
Can't you see a bunch of Cabernet vines there?
Oh my God.
That's a beautiful wine. That is so different from the Zin. Amazing.
Right?
Just so different.
Wow. But how do you explain that? How do you explain to someone who is paying the bills that you're going to put in Grenache and Syrah and not Cab?
Well, Elton is paying the bills.
I am paying the bills.
How do you look in the mirror and explain that to yourself?
I kept it in, and I almost got in a fist fight with Keith and the winemaker when I saw what yield, because we got about a half ton an acre off the entire acre of Syrah and Grenache up there for the first vintage. And I was like, you guys, I could have just had this replanted all at the same time, and you guys want to screw around, and this isn't what we do. You want a paycheck, So and then everything had mellowed out. We were going around and tasting through the lots in the winery. And I was like, now this is good. What is this? This isn't the Zin. And they're like, guess the wine you were bitching about, So it's expensive. I think it's over $100.
Sardonic cellar worker imitation.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
It's a bargain for what our farming is. We can't sell it. We can't sell it to distribution because we wouldn't make any money. We just sell it direct as like a little treat for our wine club. And like Zinfandel, it started slow when we produced 2015. Everybody's like, why are you making this? And now everybody's like, when is that released?
Wait, you're sold out? What do you mean?
Yeah. This is delicious. It's got a nice little kind of gaminess to it, both in aromatics and taste. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Elton, what did you guys do in 2020? Did you put out any wines?
We did. Like I said, we were, I got ahead of myself with the leaf water potentials, and we were running, into the 13s and 14s before the 112 degree weather hit up there for 2 straight weeks, and then the flames arrived. So we got some wine in, and the wine is very good. It's like Chateau Montrose pH, it's like full on 3.55, but it is very nice wine and smoke free. But we only got, we didn't get 2,000 cases. We got 500.
But
so it's a ramen noodle year.
Hold on a second, though. I explain something. You've said twice now that you got ahead of yourself on the leaf. Say it again. The leaf
water potentials.
Leaf water potentials.
The LWPs, as Phil likes to say.
Right.
LWP.
Are you saying that? Who's making these calls? Are you making these calls? You and Keith together?
Our winemaker and Keith, and then me when I'm there in the vineyards. So come in.
So you're not just sitting at your desk, thinking out, sales trips. You're obviously very hands-on in this.
Oh no, I'm heavily involved in the farming and in the blending, and the overall production side of the winery is where you live, because when I started, we were not maximizing, I would say, the use of these incredible vineyards that we had. And so when Bob retired in 2012, we were 20% estate grown, and now we're 90%. So I bought more vineyards. We bought the Veeder vineyard, we bought the Candlestick vineyard. And I said, of course, when Bob was there, and there's no better person in the business, but I didn't want to have to invest together in vineyards and then have to buy him out of an appreciating vineyard as he was ready to, exit the wine business, go to Arizona. So, but I wanted to bring some Grenache Syrah, as precious as this is to you boys.
Thank you.
So you can give a little.
So we'd care about your Cabernet. No, I know how you played it. Well played, sir. Well played.
All these wines are really elegant so far, so I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Hit me over the head with that fucking Cabernet. Bring it over here.
We're gonna bring you the Gargle Master over here, like the atmospheric river. You have 12 inches of Cabernet bottle is right behind this.
So, what was it that? Why in the hell did the Bunchus hire you to come out and be national sales manager? Like, are you a team Jim or are you a team Jeff?
I'm team both, but I say to you, Jeff, you never show up for lunch And so if you ever listen to this, you're on the out, man. Now the Bun Shoes, they had a national sales manager that came in and did my first sales meeting when I started working at the distributor. They just hired me on, and I just remember driving up to Indianapolis, and Jim McCullough, who was just an amazing man. He was the one that he had this incredible baritone voice, and he used to be a radio guy in Philadelphia, and then moved to California and represented their wine for 15 years.
Yeah.
But he'd say, Elton, my lad, distributors are more interested in selling our wines if it's in their warehouse rather than ours. He was awesome.
There's a lot of truth to that,
But
isn't
yeah,
there?
exactly. But it was my first sales meeting, and this guy speaks a few minutes about the Academy Awards, and what an absolute travesty. Do the Right Thing did not receive the Academy Award. He's like, Driving Miss Daisy is a bunch of trite trash, and I thought, who is this guy, and so he took us out to lunch, and we got lit up. He ordered everybody's wines at the Keystone Grill. I'll never forget it. And I decided, I said, man, this wine business, these Friday meetings, I cannot wait to come to the next one. And then it's just, I'm like, wow, nobody's like this guy, And so the years go by. I met Jim and Jeff at the Swiss Hotel here, where you meet all the important people.
Right.
And I kept in touch with him when I went to Robert Mondavi Winery, and became a manager in the Midwest with Mondavi. And, one day the Bun Shoes called and said, hey, Jim's going to retire, and we would like to interview you for national sales. And the rest is history. I came to California, I think in '97, with $5,000 in a checking account, and now I'm $30 million in debt. It's been a meteoric rise. It's been a meteoric rise in this business, boys. But how about this Grenache, right?
All right, so you got all this extra money in your pocket. Oh wait, maybe you don't.
You have all this extra money in Bank of America's pocket
And
American
now, how
Express's
do you
pocket.
get into NFTs? And tell me how this all comes about.
Well, I have to confess, I have a very young with it guy that manages our sales, our wine club, all of our direct-to-consumer sales, which is most of our revenue now, and most of our volume sales as well as a small joint. You have to if you rely on distributors. God help you. And Southern, I love you. RNDC, if you're listening, I love you too. But, he said, hey, we have this opportunity with one of his friends that they had done a lot of big time tech projects with NFT and everything else. And I said, well, I'd love to try it. But for us, I still can't get my arms around, they want your wine in the metaverse. And so when somebody would buy our NFT, they basically got, a visit and one of a very exclusive wine of ours that they make. So for $1,000, they're basically getting $1,000 worth of product, because I still couldn't get my head around selling something that was nothing. They're like, well, they have this, I felt like it's the Seinfeld episode. It's about nothing, right. Nothing, Jerry. But in any event, so we did a successful NFT offering, and I think we are completely sold out. And I tell you, it's an entirely different group of people that come to Napa that have been collecting sports NFTs or whatever it is. But
and they're into Bitcoin, most likely. A lot of them are into crypto.
Yes.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's a great time for me to get into crypto. Crypto's doing really well.
Super awesome.
Oh my God! I just,
pay for your crypto, pay for your self-driving Tesla to take you home and your crypto money.
We just can't wait to see the other Sam Bankman-Fried come up to and have a glass of wine with us. And
that guy looks like he has a good time.
Are you guys ready for the palate cleanser?
Hell yeah!
Let's do some of this 2009. But my whole deal with doing this did bring in some. I mean, I love the great wines of the world, but when Robert Craig, when I bring Robert Craig out and there's a brown bag, I put my wine on the table with anybody's wines on the planet Earth. It doesn't matter. I feel like we have the vineyards, and we just need to. My goal as a brand is not to have a $400 wine. It's to have people respect us for making some of the greatest wine on the planet. And I think of a wine that I've always collected and always loved in the Napa Valley, Philip Togny. And, when he got that 100-point score from Galoni on the 13 vintage, oh my God, the wine went from $95 a bottle to $170 a bottle in the same effing release. So I wrote a poison pen letter that they probably have somewhere framed at the winery because I was so incensed over it. So now I can't go to the winery and get wine. I have to go buy it from K&L or somebody. But I was so angry about the whole, we're going to whore ourselves out on this 100-point score. But good on him. I mean, the wine, I still collect it because I love the wine so much. But I feel like Craig can be there. And how's this La Landon? I love Rene Rostaing wine.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's all that like.
I don't know. It smells like it's a little farther along maybe than it.
It is a little. I mean, especially after having fresh Grenache, it's a little in the funk. But
we'll come back to it. It's clean, but to me, it's not an absolute perfect bottle. But I wouldn't kick it out of bed.
It'll blow off.
It'll blow off. Oh, well,
he's got to let it.
I'm going to say. I'm going to let
it open up.
I'm going to let that. I'm going to let that. It's been cellared perfectly. So I'm going to get a hold of Rare Wine Company. If you're listening, Rare Wine Company. There's another company.
There's some listeners. There's some listeners in the Rare Wine Company.
We'll talk.
Actually,
I'm a
couple
good
swirls.
customer of
It's already
theirs.
smelling better, actually.
Is Rare Wine Company still in Sonoma?
No,
It used to be 8th Street East, man.
Right.
But they sold. I don't know who they sold to.
I don't know. Yeah, Manny sold, and then I mean the smart thing that is they're now in Burlingame, which they're like right next to the airport where all the wine comes in and out. But I don't know. I know that I don't think Phil and Robert were Cayman kept a pretty big. They were pretty
Paid the Sonoma rent.
Paid the Sonoma rent for a long time. Among others, apparently.
Yeah,
Many others.
Cayman, I'm sure, would have a tough time paying that rent.
Yeah.
That's a joke, people.
He jokes, brags about how he's the poorest guy on the top of the mountain anymore, but
Right.
It's just a matter of degrees, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know if does somebody corporate own Rare Wine Company now? I don't know.
Somebody bought them that has a lot of money.
Yeah.
But
They sure as hell have a nice list of wines.
yes, they do.
Nice and
So-
nice and expensive tue.
That's who turned me on to Bartolo Mascarello and GB Berlotto and Rene Rostaing. This Rostaing 2009, I have other bottles from that are not from them that are really, really good. So we'll see. I'll let this one open up a little bit. I think.
Yeah.
We need to see what's happening. I just feel like I want you guys to come away with possibly the impression that Napa Valley may be worth another look, under the covers, that there is some stuff happening, and it's not with always all the usual suspects with, Mathiasen or Sam Kaplan's making some really cool alternative stuff. And why am I blanking the guy who was at Larkmead that makes some really interesting
Dan Massican.
Massican wines.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a cadre.
Lewandowski, no.
There's a cadre of people that
Dan-
everybody thinks of being the only people in Napa that are outliers.
Petrosky. They were
Dan Petrosky,
Yes.
that's right. His wines are very, very nice too. Every time I have those wines, but California as a whole is an innovative place, and I love what Artie had to say about it, saying that it's not about competing for Napa. It's never really been about competing with Sonoma. I mean, you look at the wine auctions,
Right.
But you look at people that have come to Sonoma, like a Verite, or who are making more highly prized wines, maybe than anybody in the Napa Valley. You look at, I see you had the Knolls on with their Zinfandel is so spectacular. So everybody has their place, but I don't want Napa to be seen as this is just how it is. It's overpriced. It's just frozen in time, because it's not. That's my goal.
and you know what? And I don't think that we realistically do. It's easy to kick kick Napa along as we go through. And I think ultimately it probably all started with the first time when we went over to that gentleman's house for the podcast from Bounty Hunter. And he introduced us to neighbor pricing. And, you know, well, if my neighbor's getting $400 a bottle, then mine must be $500 a bottle. And that's kind of like we took that joke and kind of ran with it. So, no, I think we appreciate what happens in Napa in the cab world. But it's, yeah.
We've done a lot of shows over in Napa.
No, I wouldn't say we've done a lot. But.
Well, it's just an easy kick. Like we like to kick Scribe every now and then, right? Because it's an easy kick because they're doing well, and they got the cool kids over there, and for us it's an easy kick to Napa because they're selling the, you know, they got Promontory and you got, you know, these great Harlan wines and Verite, and I mean it's great to make fun of them because you think that they're like this big castle with thick walls, right? But maybe they are shedding a little tear a little bit when we're doing that. And so maybe we should back off a little bit.
No,
shedding tears, but also shedding copper roof shingles, right? Which is what we really.
And it's so on brand for us.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I that is why I've enjoyed your podcast. I mean, when I do a webinar every month, at the end, I have whoever my guest is. I always say at the very last thing I do when I have other winemakers on or restaurateurs, I say, so who's the biggest asshole in the Napa Valley? And Phil had the best answer to that. He goes, well, I can't name just one.
Well, I'm only there 3 days a week, so.
Well, you guys have done really well with the Zooms, right? You're doing a lot of virtual tastings, or at least you were during the pandemic, and it kind of you're fairly what do you say?
Active.
You're a good guy to be doing those Zooms. I mean, you're interactive, right, with your guests that were coming on, and that kind of, you guys were pretty successful during the pandemic and moving some wine when all the restaurants were closed and no one was selling unless it was DTC.
It was, I mean, literally it was the only thing that kept us alive because we were basically 80% plus in restaurants in the national market. And that just went away. I mean, that business overnight disappeared. And all of a sudden I said, I'm just going to find somebody who's interesting like you guys have for your podcast. And it's gone crazy. And I thought nobody wants to hear this shit anymore. Everybody's tired of COVID. Everybody's tired of the virtual experience, but they're not. You know, it's been a whole way of, and in particular, if you have good visuals, and our places are the mountain vineyards that we inhabit. They're such incredible spots visually that when you take people on a journey and say, this is how we're doing the pruning, and then they can see a video of the pruning, it really brings farming, the valley, what we do, different perspectives on it to them. And so for us, it's been a godsend. So this affinity is from Coombsville. This is Bob Craig's front yard. I turned the joint into a crack house with a vineyard in front of it.
Nice.
Degentrification.
Yes, degentrification. The neighbors are like, can Bob please come back? You know,
what is this organic? It's messy under that vineyard.
Shoot out the street lights.
But so it's called affinity. I put the definition right on the front label: a perfect union of components sharing a special origin. Because everybody'd say, so why do you call it infinity? I'd be like, my God, you know. But it's always all 5 of the Bordeaux 5. So we label it as Cabernet Sauvignon, but 6 out of 10 vintages, it's legally Cabernet. Sometimes I have to take some Cabernet Franc out. And then we're going to have to do something because the vineyard's going to be replanted now. So it's probably going to be Howell Mountain fruit and purchase fruit after 2022 for a number of years. So, or until I can buy another vineyard. As the bank said when we bought Veeder after the Candlestick purchase, they said, this is another vineyard? I'm like, I know, right?
What's the average cost of buying a vineyard in Napa these days?
Well, per acre in the mountains, you know, it's all about planted acre. I mean, there was a nice little house on our Mount Veeder property. And, you know, there were 2 home sites on the Howell Mountain property when we bought that from Duckhorn. but that's all immaterial. It's all about what's in the ECP, what's in the erosion control plan, how much can you plant, and how much is planted. And the going rate now, depending on where you are in the mountain, is anywhere from $600,000 to $1 million a planted acre. So it's become, financially in the Napa Valley, people like, oh my God, the people that are getting in now are, the wine has to be over $200 a bottle just to make it pencil out. Yeah. And some of my neighbors, one of my neighbors who is a friend and famously very wealthy, and we drink a lot of wine together, but they're like, Elton, I've always said it's just okay to make money in the Napa Valley. And I'm like, well, if I took the entire development cost of our place and it never hit the P&L or the balance sheet, then I would be wearing an ascot and have a cocaine habit. It was like, you got to be kidding me. If I were starting from scratch with zero debt, people would be calling me Elton Iacocca. Right. So, in any event, we're profitable, like, knock on wood, but you gotta kick it every day. You gotta get the shovel in the ground.
That's the thing. I mean, what is it like competing with people that don't necessarily have to be profitable?
Right.
I mean, that's a weird thing, right? Because if you're in business, in any traditional business that you're in, if you're competing with people that don't have to make money, then, I mean, you're so fucking far behind the eight ball. So I mean,
authenticity.
Right.
Hallelujah.
What do you shoot
We'll put
for?
that word in with precision, artisanal, oyster shell, and salinity.
Well, and then couple that with
Touché.
the fact that people aren't coming to Napa anymore like they used to come up and stock their cellar. Now you're chipping away, right? Little by little, with younger people that are buying 5 bottles, 6 bottles case, maybe. It's not like the big buyers that it used to be like. It's kind of like a different atmosphere, right? So what is it that you guys are shooting for at Robert Craig? Is like, what is your desired demographic of consumer?
Well, the beautiful thing at Robert Craig, I will say, I was very late to social media, and I still don't hardly do anything on it except for Instagram, because it's been such a medium to connect with people, and our virtual tastings where people get connected through, cyberspace in some ways. And the culture that we have is appealing, where it is authentic and it is warm. And I always think Margaret Duckhorn, when we host people at our place, the one thing we constantly get, and it's the most difficult thing, is finding the people, because a lot of people are making great wine. So we found the vineyards, which are absolutely unique in what they produce. And we've found the people to deliver that warmth of an experience in a place that can be very cold. We do a lot of secret shopping at Robert Craig. And I mean, we went to a vineyard where the tasting fees, the 4 of us, the tasting fees were $200 a person. Whoa. And then, they don't know me from Adam. And we got 2 glasses of wine with this much in it, each. No white wine, no nothing, no champagne. Like at least you get some champagne at Promontory,
Call it lube.
Yeah, call it lube. There's an atmospheric river coming in.
Krug lube.
But and then I said, well, can I, they ended up opening, because we were, effusive in our praise for the wine. They ended up opening another wine for us. We had 3 wines. And I said, well, may I see the prices? And there was no price. And then she said, well, we don't say the price of the wines, And I thought
shall be unnamed.
I thought Ashton Kutcher was going to jump out from the bag, be like, punk, bitch, you're punk. And it was the whole tasting was very weird. You can't go down on the crush pad because that's the winemaker's space. And there's nothing going on down there at the time. I'm like,
nothing up my sleeves.
Yes. I'm like, okay.
Can't go to the crush base because that's where we keep the 50-gallon drum of Mega Purple.
Yeah. I don't think that was going on, but I mean, it was obviously farmed very well, and the wines were very nice, but they weren't no Robert Craig. And so I said, all right, I'll take a 3-pack. I'll do 3 bottles of the Cabernet, because the whole thing was very strange. And then as I'm sitting there, my credit card goes, my watch goes, a $1,575 purchase was made on, and I was like, I thought, how bad can it be? It's going to be like $250 a bottle or something, but it was, $500 a bottle for the wine. I just thought, you got to be kidding me. So we've been through that. And at Robert Craig, that is not the experience. That's the opposite of the experience that I want people to have with the wines. I want them to feel confident that they're drinking some of the best, most rare wine in the world, but at the same time that it's real, because that's, in the end, that's who I am. Those are the wineries that I like to participate in. Yeah. And that's why I love the mountain wineries of Napa, because I have neighbors that make some of the best wine I've ever tried from Napa, and they're a similar price to us, under $120.
Is that $200 tasting fee about the most expensive, or do they go above?
Oh, they go above.
Oh, they go well.
What do you think? What do you think is the highest?
Well, I think with Promontory, you have to buy a 3-pack of the wine. So if you do the tasting, you got to buy some wine.
$3,000 basically.
Yeah. So,
but you get some champagne.
You do get champagne. I don't know I shouldn't say, because, that's a phenomenal experience, but there are people that have way, way higher. If you want to do anything with food, $1,000 is extremely common in the Napa Valley, but there are plenty of places you can go. I think there's so much emphasis at a certain point put on giving people this seated experience that they have to sign. I think, man, I don't want all that. Right. Personally, I just want to go and try somebody's wine and say, can you pour me this and this and this, and just let me check out your jam. Let me see what your vibe is at this place, and whether or not I
get to know you.
Don't make me taste the first wine and say, Jesus, I hate this. Now what do I have left?
Right.
Do I have to say, I'll leave now?
So what is, for our listeners that are planning trips out, what is the experience at Robert Craig? Is there a choice, either downtown Napa or going up to the mountain? Is it structured, or just what are the opportunities?
So we have our downtown Napa tasting salon, which is 1 block from a great champagne bar, Be Bubbly, on 2nd Street. So it's close to everything. Plenty of parking all around there. And that's $35 to come in and check out 5 wines with not the, as Bob Craig called it, a pop, the piss off pour. Where somebody gets one of those measuring things out and pours you like a 1/4 ounce of wine. But you come in, it's $35. Then you buy a couple bottles, you get refunded. But if you come out and it's a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, those are the only times we have open for the mountain, because our use permit is low. And the Affinity tasted a little oxidative to me, but it's very nice from Coomsville. But if you get the mountain experience is $125, but if you buy 6 bottles of wine, that's also refunded, because that takes a full day for somebody to host. You come up, you get munchies, you're at the summit of the Napa Valley. So they're 2 great experiences, and they're hosted by people that are not going, if you ask them a question, they're not going to go to a 3-ring binder. They are involved in the blending. They know what's going on with the farming. They know what we do. It's all about knowledge at our place. And so whether you get Casey or Scott or Carly, she's going down to New Zealand. I'm going to miss her. She started off as a harvest worker, and turns out she's an incredible winemaker. Now I'm letting her go down to New Zealand to do her jam there, and then come back. And she's so fantastic. She's now on our direct sales team. But knowledge is required.
Right. Cool.
Well, and in defense of Napa wine prices, what you just talked about isn't cheap. The land, the farming, the winemaking at the top level, the team of knowledgeable, experienced people. Not to dig into the books, but $120 Napa Cabernet, you're hustling every day to make that work.
No doubt. And for us, it's because, frankly, Bob Craig was a terrible marketer of his own wines. He was a tremendous guy and a visionary. But, when I started, he was making a lot of wine from, he was doing Amador County. He was doing 1,000 cases of Sonoma, 2 different Sonoma Chardonnays. I'm like, dude, you're the Mountain Cab guy. We're getting rid of the Central Coast Syrah and the Amadors in and the Chardonnays. It's like, let's focus on who you are, which is a Mountain Cabernet guru. And so it was just about getting the marketing right. But at the same time, if we sell most of it direct as we do now, it's profitable, it's good, it's fulfilling. I don't have to be the Jerry Sandusky of the wine business. I feel like it's just a terrible thing to say, but I just feel like some of it that, and you mentioned it, Bart, that it's so driven by ego anymore. Pricing should not be driven by ego. If you're in Sonoma or in Napa Valley, Florida, you're paying $10,000 to $12,000 to $13,000 an acre to farm the place. And that's if you have a rose bush on the end of every row and a nice rock wall and the place always looks pretty. The invoices from your pop and from Pete Richmond, it's over $22,000 to $26,000 an acre, to farm it. And that is because you guys at Enterprise are the best. I mean, there's just like the goal when somebody hires you is to make the best wine on the planet Earth. There's it's not like, hey, we'll just get some mold on some bunches, so don't do the spray, or how do we get 5 tons an acre from this place? I'd like Phil would be like, what are you talking about?
You hire somebody else.
what are you talking about?
But the thing about it is, Elton, is you also notice that the fruit that comes into your winery, you're using all of it, right? You're not having to sort it. The fruit comes in. There's no waste at that point. There's
nothing going into an alternative program because this block didn't work or that block. I think that's one of the best points. One of the best points that's ever been made on anything I've ever been asked about the business. That throughput is what kills you if you're not maximizing your property. Right. Let's do Veeder now. Let's do your pops. Okay. What your
wine
pops
was great, by the way.
Yeah, it is delicious.
Thank you.
I have an affinity for that wine. That's terrible. That's just awful.
You don't think that's been used before?
Never. Nobody's ever said that to you before, right?
Well, I can't. I prattled on way too long. I can't tell your guests how much fun we're having because it's literally a sunshiny, windless, perfect evening out here in the most beautiful town in the entire world, the town of Sonoma, California. It really is. I mean, where else are you going to go? I spent the night up at the Swiss Hotel at Hank's Place and one of those upper rooms and. Did
you see the ghosts?
I had Bunshu and the gang. I've seen some ghosts.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it was because of the mixture of mushrooms and marijuana and Bunshu Chardonnay that I was having.
That's never happened in
What are the
Sonoma
hotel
before.
rooms like at the Swiss?
Well, I've always stayed in the upstairs, but if you get one of those upstairs rooms and the roosters aren't on the prowl, when people would always come and drop, I used to love the Sonoma Index Tribune where it was like roosters in or roosters out, right? Because whoever was dropping the chickens off.
The chickens of the plaza.
The chickens haven't been around much.
Oh my God. Yeah. If the chickens are down there and it's starting at 5:00 in the summertime, it's like,
I did want to say, Elton, we are slightly over an hour.
Okay.
Just in case you were.
We can only go to Howell Mountain. We're gonna polish this baby up.
No. That was a comment to your comment.
Yeah. So now we're doing, to me, the affinity tasted a little oxidative. And I will tell you that that wine is usually tighter. The Veeder is perfect. But so this is the last year that we were able to use Pymrae, Pymrae, the 2 middle names of Robin Williams' firstborn children. But this is Robin Williams' vineyard that we had a handshake contract. Bob Craig oversaw the planting of the vineyard with Brian Nuss, and we had a handshake contract on this from the 93 vintage. I think Bob planted it in 89, so we did it from 93 to 2015. And then when Robin died, it was much less exciting having that contract with his widow's attorneys. than it was with Robin. But the Tesserons from Chateau Ponte Canet in Pauillac bought the place, and they make wonderful wine. But they've never received a higher score from Galoni on their wine than we do next door, because Brian decided he wanted to sell the joint next door, which was on the same original erosion control plan. And I call it Amentet Vineyard because our Veeder program, she's the Egyptian goddess of rebirth, was reborn with Amentet. So it's immediately next door, same soil, very similar vineyard. Your pop calls it, Phil calls it the hanging garden of Napa Valley because it sits over a ledge right up above Boz Skaggs' place. I loved Boz's music until he was my downstairs neighbor. But, you know, all in all.
Is that Newfoundland?
That's who makes those wines.
Yeah, exactly. But good guys, you know.
Grenache from Napa.
John, yeah, but he has that wine is fantastic, you know, from his property next door. But ours is Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc, and this is the last vintage of Pimray for us, but incredibly similar. I mean, you literally cannot distinguish the two properties. So theirs is, I want to say, a 17-acre vineyard, and ours is 7 acres under vine, and just a magnificent expression. It's got that savage Mount Veeder. I always think of Affinity is Margaux, and as the, you know, that really pretty elegance, but also that firm backbone, that acid that's Coombsville. And then Veeder is Saint-Julien. Reminds me of like a Léoville-Las Casses or a Bécheville with that huge fruit pop and that power in the center. Yep. And then Howell Mountain is Santa Steph, man. That's our Montrose or Côte d'Esternel. It's all about the structure.
I mean, this is all about, it just hangs there and hangs there.
The finishing. Right.
Just amazing. Yeah.
It's so Mount Veeder. That just like, there's a rusticness on the finish for me that I just like, you know. Yeah, Maya Kamas has that, you know, maybe sort of, you know, personifies that more than anything. But this has that that reference to it for sure.
To me, your Pops wine that got from our place for the first time, 2019, he affected 2021. You know, 2020 got burned out. The 2021, there's a little more polish behind the wines and not as much of pyrazine because the Veeder up to this point was farmed literally with a guy in a truck with a dog.
Right.
But it's just such a tremendous property up there. Yeah. So let's go to Howell Mountain.
That's delicious.
But what I love is the acidity. You know, these pHs are in the high 3.6s, low 3.7s. It's pure Bordeaux. So these wines aren't heavy. And despite the fact they see, you know, 80% new French oak, the oak is all super tight grained. It's not like an oak bomb.
No, I would have never guessed.
No, 80%. I would have never guessed it. It's so well integrated. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, going back to us making fun of Napa, you know, we don't taste a lot, and what we taste sometimes is just the over the top. And these are balanced and, you know,
Elton, crafted. I just got a text from somebody in St. Louis, and evidently,
hey, Roger,
your wines are widely distributed in most restaurants. So,
St. Louis is one of my soul food towns. That is, I know so many people from there, from Glenn Bargett at Annie Gunn's and John and the whole crew there. It's one of the great wine restaurants in the United States. To the Crossing, to the St. Louis Wine Merchant. I mean, there's, you know, our Clayton Wine Merchant, or the Wine Merchant of St. Louis, I should say, get their name right. But that was where I first discovered, you know, Becky Wasserman's wines and so many of the. I used to go up from Indianapolis, and they had retailers there that were just spectacular.
When did you live in Indy?
So I was in Indianapolis from. I graduated Indiana University in '89 and worked for a year in Southern Indiana. And then the vice president of wine sales came to me and said, Elton, we'd really like to come to Indianapolis. And I was like, I was living on a beautiful place on the lake and water skiing down there. And I said, you know, I'll think about it. And he goes, I'm really not asking. So I was in Indianapolis for National Wine and Spirits from, I want to say, 90 to 96. Or 97.
I was there 76 through 81 and had John play at my 30th birthday at the Vogue Theater.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
No, right before.
How do you hold this back from me all this time, John?
Right before I Need a Lover came out, so he wasn't well known.
John and Joe.
Yeah, yeah. So it was interesting, really fun. We had a great time.
Maybe.
Oh my God.
John and Joe.
The Vogue that was one of the greatest concert places. And when I lived in Indianapolis, we lived about 3 blocks from the Vogue when I first moved up.
You were in along the canal.
Yeah, well, we were on Park Street, I believe, which was just south of the Vogue, and like a couple blocks, 1 block in from what is the name of that street? Not Broadway. My God, College Avenue.
Yeah.
We were one block west of College Avenue. I think it was called Park. And so it was a 3-block walk, and I saw so many tremendous bands. Lots. And the owner of the Vogue loved wine, so I would break out a case of wine, and for the next 3 shows, it was like a case for 3 shows, whether it was Ben Harper or Johnny Cash or whomever. We just walk over there. I go to the back door, and they had those tables up on the side on the wings. And I got like the second table. I didn't get the first table because that was the owner's table. But I can hardly go see music anymore because it was I felt like I was Tony Soprano going out to that concert.
It was great. We used to go to the Union Pub and the Garage for pork tenderloins.
Oh my God. I didn't realize I was sitting with the brother in arms here. So now we're on to 15 Howell. So we've done 3 15s. The Affinity to me was not showing perfectly, but the Veeder was showing perfectly. And this smells great.
I guess, tasting these 2015s also just reaffirms the reason why there's Cabernet is grown in Napa, right? I mean, these wines are so fresh and young and vibrant. Very cool. Yeah. Very, very cool.
Does anyone have the roti in another glass?
I do.
Right here.
Go back to it.
Yeah, I think.
All right, enough about Napa Cabernet. How's this old Syrah from France?
These fucking guys are immediately coming back on me.
Smells like tiramisu.
Oh man,
It does smell like tiramisu.
Okay,
Super coffee.
Okay, it's getting better. Yeah. Well, the Howell Mountain are.
This cab is lovely.
Yeah, thank you. But it is, to me, these mountain cabs, what has always been the hallmark of Craig is the freshness of the fruit in the wines. And so I am going to stop by and drop off a bottle of Affinity 15 for you guys to enjoy here, because that wine was a little bit of a leaker on the cork, and to me it tasted a little oxidative. So it was the other David Ramey no from traditional cork. But Affinity, to me, of the 15s, shows better usually than the Howell and the Veeder, which are more expensive because of that acid from that property. But this wine, so this is, again, the very top of Napa Valley, Howell Mountain. You have above the fog means that, it's 12 degrees cooler during the average daytime temperature. And then you get this nighttime where, in particular in the fall, you get this non-photosynthetic lignification, the browning of the stems and the seeds. And so the grapes aren't producing any more sugar, so there's no more alcohols, and you have these crazy tannin counts because of the fact that the wines have this massive tannin, but the tannins get ripe and integrated and round, so you get these very long-lived wines have this freshness and elegance to them despite their size. And that's what makes Howell Mountain, to me, it's my favorite wine, because it's our Sang de Caillou. It's our blood of the stones.
These are wines to put down.
This one in particular, you think? I mean, it's tasting great, but you're right. You're definitely getting more of that tannin structure in this wine.
The thing that strikes me about it is, for as tannic and big, bold wine as it is, it's not the classic black currant cassis Cabernet. It's like red currant. It's much brighter, red fruit colors, high toned, which for me, makes those tannins totally manageable.
Well, I have to say, 15, I brought this for a reason, is because, it was a very difficult vintage to extract. It was like 2021 in some ways, in that it was a very light the vintage was
Tiny
like
little
half
berries
the
and-
yield, and the color would not come out until you really beat it up, And so for us, I think we're very careful on the tannin management, and so we didn't crank these wines, to that dark side. Like in the future from here, the farming's better, the winery equipment's better, everything's better. But I love these wines because they're so classic in terms of displaying the site. I mean, how different do these three
they're also
wines
that's
taste for Cabernet,
Yeah.
And that's one thing that Galoni said about a perennial Napa, love child, that I just love Galoni for this, is he said, these are all very well-made wines, but I couldn't tell one from the other. And for the life of me, I don't know why somebody would make a wine like this. I was like, holy shit, you're cranking on the perennial darling there. But I that's one thing. He's a prickly pear, but you have to love the man for just, not saying it's the emperor's new clothes every time in the review. So this is my story, you guys. I hope it's kind of torn the curtain a little bit on some things going on in Napa Valley, and that it's been so great meeting you all and sitting down on this perfect afternoon, and that we'll be able to get to this Cote Roti now and just gargle that thing down like it's nothing.
Sounds like
it looks
sounds like a plan.
It looks like a piece of meat to a Rottweiler after 2 days on a diet. These guys are just looking at it.
I was going to say nice things about your wine, but forget it.
And I remember, I think I told Elton that the last time I had done a tasting at Robert Craig was like 2003, I think. And I feel like we almost tasted in like a mobile home or an RV. There was no tasting room. I think I was with the Four Seasons San Francisco at the time. And we were coming to Napa and doing the baller tastings. We were going to all the big players. Then we stopped at Robert Craig but it's one of those tastings that I always remember, because I remember really loving the wines, because that was all you thought about when we were in the tasting that day was the quality of the wine. And now I get to come back
because you didn't have any distractions.
There was no distractions. It was like being at Corbin Cameron after the fire. I mean, you were sitting on top of a trailer,
a bald mountain,
staring at a burned out home, drinking awesome Merlot.
Right.
But all these wines are shown great. And Bart, to your point, I think about drinking cabs that I think sometimes we drink over the top shit. That happens in Sonoma too. Like I've had some of those Sonoma cabs that are just like
keeping up with trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, my favorite thing about especially the last two wines is just truly how different they are.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of expected tools, and especially the Napa winemakers, toolbox, things that you're supposed to do or you think you're supposed to do that would have driven those differences away, and it would have created that homogeneity that Galoni was lamenting. So what I've truly worth going to the downtown tasting room at the very least and sit down and have a taste, a real taste of the two of them next to each other. I mean, that's a real experience that you can get in Napa without having to pay $1,000 and caviar and Krug and the whole deal. It's real.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I mean, to me, the winemakers are graded on two things. And again, it's, does this wine show the vineyard, and will it age well? Yeah. Because other than that, to my mind, what are we doing?
And I think another takeaway here is these wines are all distinctive in their own. There's not the thumbprint of the winemaker on them. It's all about the handprint of the vineyard.
How much of that Grenache you got?
Right?
It's small.
Elton, what do you guys do for a traditional tasting? Like if people went there tomorrow and sat down, are they drinking the Chardonnay and then the Syrah Grenache and then the Zin, and then you open up the cabs, or are you guys
we focus on cab, and we usually have a bonus wine, whatever KC or Carly or Kelly feel like, whatever they're feeling is the extra wine. But we generally do like a Chardonnay. We'll do a Mount Veeder, Howell Mountain, Spring Mountain usually are the 3 wines. So it's great. I mean, people taste affinity all the time everywhere. We don't need to show people affinity, despite the fact it's to me, one of the great Cabernets produced in the Napa Valley. What we are is a Mountain Cabernet house. So we like people to have Mountain Cabernets. And then at the end, if somebody it's like anywhere else. If somebody's very interested and they're into the wines, if they're a douche, they don't get a pour a Zinfandel or a pour a Côte de Craig or whatever. It's like, you know what? Thank you very much. We'll see you
Your credit
again.
card, please, sir.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like that. Of course, everybody, but some people are not there for the wine. If they're just like, we're just doing Napa Valley because Napa Valley is Napa Valley. I just love the fact that Artie said Dwayne Wade was in Sonoma at somebody's vineyard and said, I just want the Napa experience. I mean, I freaking laughed so hard when I heard that. It's like, oh my God, you just kick a man in the head, while you're standing in his vineyard. But
I'm waiting for the time when someone's sitting at the top of your place going, God, the Sonoma experience is where it's at.
Yeah, it could happen. I tell you.
Hashtag Sonoma Life.
Yeah, exactly. Sonoma Life. Hashtag Sonoma Garage.
Well, I went to grab my wine from Literai, and I was concerned about, is this posh enough for people? And I went to grab my allocation because I love Ted Lemon's wine. I don't know if you guys are, do Literai or not, but his wines are amazing. And you go to the pickup party, it started at 10, and I was there like at 10:15, and they had like barely any water left over in the cold garage, and they were like these biscuits like you get served on an airplane, and you just went around to you got the glass and you went to a couple stations. I was like, this is fantastic, man. We need to downgrade this shit. We need to go back to the trailer with the fluorescent light. For you,
couple barrels on a plank of wood and call it a tasting room.
This is
exactly. I mean, but I thought there is something to that, just having an unfiltered experience.
I think the first place we ever tasted wine as tourists, way back when, like 87, was down at Sonoma Creek, which became Larson. And they would take you out in the barn, and they had the board across 2 barrels, and you just taste. But it was the first place we ran into, and we said, okay, let's try it. We didn't know what the hell we were doing at 87 at all. So it was fun. It was, you take away the lined street pulling up the lane with olive trees and the big house and everything else. It's down to the wine and the winemaker, and the place. That's what I'm really looking for.
Yeah, we actually had a couple guests in here last week that were talking about their first visit to Linicoloto and how they showed up down there, and they said the winemaker skated down on his skateboard and threw a 2x4 across a couple barrels. And then they said, we went back 3 or 4 years later, and it was who are you? Do you have an appointment?
Right.
It was a very different experience.
Can we see your American Express report, please?
Correct.
Yeah. Will you pass the coat roti?
There you go. Oh, you fuckers. Just absolutely cranking it. Well,
now,
you know what?
You have to.
All right, you guys, let's wrap it up with the little. Elton, thank you very much. Actually, these wines are
We talk a lot of shit, but they're fantastic.
Yeah, I know. And that's why we talk shit.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
we're distracting ourselves.
I'm impervious.
Very on brand, though.
Yeah.
I sell wine to Pakistani retailers in New Jersey, so you guys can say whatever you want.
We were
Your
gentle.
wine is terrible. Thank you.
Right. But you have T-shirts for me.
That's right.
What sort of T-shirts do you have?
Can I get an extra bottle on the 6?
My daughter's coming out there. Do you have a place for her to stay?
Show me a picture.
I don't want to talk to the salesman. I want to talk to this guy. He can set me up. Can I stay in the guest house?
All right, you guys. What do you want to push out there before we set off till next week?
Mag dinner.
So we're heading out to Eco Farm next week. So are we doing a podcast next week?
Well, we're gonna record something at the DTC.
Okay. Just means a lot of miles on my car, but I don't care. What do I care?
It on Bart's
I'll drive.
I'm getting paid to drive. Who cares?
Oh, yeah. No, you'll drive.
Okay. Okay, that sounds fair. Do we have any idea who we're going to have on the podcast?
Nope.
No.
By the time
MJ will be there. He'll hang out.
Okay.
So by the time this hits,
You'll have sent out an email.
you'll have sent out an email, Sam, for your Magnum party
Magnum
at the
party.
Fairmont.
Yes.
The Magnum dinner.
Magnum dinner.
10 seats.
10 seats.
9.
9
Sorry.
seats left.
Laura bought one.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's probably going to be sold out by Friday.
We haven't told anyone yet, so
Yeah,
yeah.
no.
But she happened to be here when we were planning it, so 9 seats.
Okay.
9 seats. I think my dad wants to go too. So 7 seats.
7 seats.
All Audoutet, because this is Audoutet month.
So Rosé,
Philippe's birthday is coming up.
Rossi, and Oakville.
18 and 19.
2 different vintages on the Grenaches.
Yep.
Okay.
And a crazy menu that Jared Reeves.
Crazy menu, executive
come up
chef
with
of
yet.
the
he's-
hotel.
Well, he's thrown some things our way, and it's kind of like, when you have an artist, when you have Stanley Mass doing your label, do you like art direct? No, you just
Right.
take whatever he gives you and go.
I know he's
Okay.
going to use the olive oil. I know
Okay.
he's doing something with herbs de Provence. I know he's doing something with duck hearts.
Okay,
That's
so it's the vegetarians and the vegans maybe hold off on this
is
one.
not your dinner.
This is not going to be your dinner. Maybe we'll do one for Earth Day, with some vegetables.
Really?
Yeah, really. And $200 a person, $175 for Phil Sent Me members. It's on the website listed right now. If there's seats left, go buy one. If you're a member and you get to that thing on the website, call us and we'll run it with the discount for you on our side. And act fast because it's going. And then that goes. Basically, we're celebrating Audoutet all month. We have Audoutet on the menu for the first time ever in the tasting house right now. The 19th, I believe.
2 of the 19s, both Rossi, and we're doing them side by side for people. So.
Yeah, the way they should be.
Yep.
Right.
So, and maybe we're gonna do a little Audoutet release this month too. So if you're not on the email list, make sure you're on the email list.
Okay. Bart Hansen, what's going on with Dane Cellars right now?
Looking forward to bottling in March, working on final blends, little tinkering here and there. But that's about it, selling wine.
We actually opened up your 16 Chenin Blanc, me, Jasmine, Dr. Lowenberg,
Dr. Dave,
and
16?
Paul. Yep. The
Oprah
other
said
day.
Oprah Winfrey's favorite wine.
It was a rainy day. We were sitting inside eating charcuterie and cheese. Opened up the wine, and we all were digging it.
They blinded me on it, and I figured it was white Burgundy.
Right. That's pretty cool, right?
Chenin Blanc.
Chenin Blanc.
Imagine that.
I didn't even know you made Chenin Blanc.
I know.
I had no
Isn't
idea.
that something?
Bart makes Chenin Blanc.
Yeah. Not a lot of it.
Is it Clarksburg?
That was Mendocino County. But
Oprah recommended his Chenin
okay,
Blanc.
that's yeah, right. By way of Brian Casey,
Every Thanksgiving,
right? Me and Oprah.
clears the boulders out of her living room and opens a bottle of Chenin Blanc. My bad. Wow. Of all the things that you guys have said today on this show, me talking about a mudslide in Oprah Winfrey's Montecito home is the one that gets the groan. All right, I see.
Gotta love that Napa Valley cab. Elton. Oh wait, I got one more question.
Uh-oh. If you've made it this far,
No, we'll
you get
to Chef
1%
Cycle.
off your bottle of Affinity
No, we'll
when
get
you
to Chef
mention
Cycle.
Elton Sent Me.
This is one more Elton question. I'm so unprepared.
Yeah. If
it's so on
if
brand.
you say the word the Winemakers Podcast, if you can break that phrase out, excuse me. Well, I've been enjoying this coat roti, but if you can break that phrase out, the Winemakers Podcast, there is no charge for you at the tasting room at Robert Craig.
There you go.
There you
All
go.
right.
Till infinity?
For Affinity. Tell
That's
Affinity.
right. It's your that's your code word. I give you the next 3 months.
All right, there you go.
Okay, last question. Have you ever ridden a pachyderm in the service of wine?
I have indeed.
Wait a minute, let me get in closer. Have you ever ridden a pachyderm in the service of wine?
I have indeed. Big Susie, and she was very nervous with all the goings on, despite the fact that she was a trained animal. Now, if my wife saw me on top of an elephant, she'd beat me to death and say that the thing needed to be, treated better. They've obviously, but that was quite an entrance as my introduction to Gunlak Bunchu in national sales.
Wow. We'll just leave it at that.
That's right.
We'll
I
just
played
leave it at
"Sympathy
that.
for the Devil" on my guitar as I was rolling in.
Man,
I mean,
the wine
there's a
business
visual.
has really gone downhill.
That's right. Well, I love you guys. Thanks for the opportunity to come out here and have a little wine and keep Napa Valley relevant in this changing world of young men and women in the business now.
Thanks, Elton. This has been great.
Well, thanks for making relevant wines from Napa Valley in this world. Yeah.
Hallelujah.